This is the year of the wood sheep, and the first question perhaps you might ask is, who said and why? And the answer to that is probably the same answer that I give when people ask me for a scientific explanation of Feng Shui. What I'm liable to say is, if you plant tomatoes in January, don't expect great salads. And if you plant them on a north-facing wall, even worse. Now we are all subject to the forces of change. Everything is changing all the time. Everything is either growing or it's shrinking. It's being born or it's dying. Every single thing that there is like that. And we're subject to those same forces. And we all understand the integrity of change and of time and space. But very rapidly, to kind of justify how Chinese metaphysics has arrived at this, let me just explain that over a period of perhaps tens of thousands of years, but certainly thousands of years, a series of Chinese geniuses observed the cycles of time and space and saw that they were, in a sense, the same thing. Now, if you imagine that I'm looking south, which I'm probably looking west. If you imagine I'm looking south, so north is behind me, east is to my left, and west is to my right. And what they observed was that here, just as the northeast becomes the east, in terms of the day, you get light. The dawn happens here, somewhere between, say, 4 and 8 in the morning. And they called that wood. So when Chinese masters talk about wood, it's not some weird idea to confuse Westerners. They're talking about the coming of the light. They're talking about a stirring. They're talking about movement, if you like. So they observed that this process happens both in the day, this is the dawn, but also in the year. So the reason that the Chinese New Year is this kind of time of the year is because it's the dawn of the year. It is the month of the tiger, which is the same energy, if you like, as the hour of the tiger, and it sits in the northeast. So Feng Shui is built around this idea of the integration of time and space. So we have the tiger here, which is wood, and we have the rabbit, which is wood, and then we come into fire. And fire is simply the next stage. Fire is as things accelerate. Fire is, by extension, about celebrity, visibility, and those sorts of things. But it is this wood stretching for the light, if you like. And it's pretty clear that whether we're talking about the day or the year, that if we're going to get anything done, we'll be doing it by midday. We'll be starting to move. That it is warmer in the middle of the day than it probably is first thing in the morning. It is probably lighter and brighter and so on. And then this cycle proceeds to the afternoon, or if we're looking at the year, it proceeds to the autumn, when the element is what's called metal. And what's metal? Metal is kind of counting up. It is precision, it is accuracy, it is proportion. Balanced metal is very, very precise. Unbalanced metal is kind of dogmatic. You can see that those qualities are the same, and by extension, metal things are things like introspection, things like teaching, and so on and so forth. The action of metal is to go in, where the action of wood is to go out, and the action of fire is to go up. And we come round, so we have here perhaps August, September. The animals concerned are the monkey and the rooster, and then we come behind me in the north is the water, the rat, and the rat month is December, and the rat hour is midnight. So they observe this process, which I think you can see. Those cycles are clearly the same one, and they're clearly related to space as well. So essentially, that is the heart of what classical Chinese Feng Shui is. What they also built into this, they came up with a cycle of 12 animals. So you have tiger, rabbit. If you follow my arm, I'll be going round the clock and round the compass at the same time. We have tiger, northeast, east, the moment of the dawn, when the tiger sort of leaps into action. The tiger is very patient. Then we have the rabbit, and we have the dragon, and we have the snake, and we have the horse at high noon. The horse is about visibility. The horse is about publicity, promotion, those kinds of things. We've just come out of a horse year, 2014, which is a year of revelation. So we had a series of scandals and various forms of malfeasance and misbehavior, the CIA and stuff happening in Rotherham, and various rumored scandals among MPs and so on, which came to light. That's the nature of a horse year, so this is fire. Then we come to the sheep year. And the sheep year is very different. It is past, if you like, the high noon of that cycle. So if you think of that, this same cycle applying not just to the hours of the day and the months of the year, but also applying to a cycle of years, the sheep is in effect just past noon in a year that consists of 12 years, which is called, in Feng Shui terms, the Tai Sui, that is a great year. So we're just past the noon of a great year. And there is a cycle of 12 animals, so we go from the sheep to the monkey, to the rooster, to the dog, to the pig, to the rat behind me, to the ox. Those are the 12 animals. And there are 5 variants of each, because the cycle that was observed was of 5 elements, that is wood, fire, metal, water, and earth in the middle of the reference. So each animal has 5 variants. So we have a cycle of 12 years, and the last sheep year was 2003. It was 2003. So sheep years are somewhat similar. Because we put in these 5 elements as variations, there is a bigger cycle of 60. So wood sheep years are extremely similar. So I will be elaborating on that in a minute, but let me just talk you through the mumbo jumbo here very rapidly first. So this, the character there, I'm going to be in front if I go there. The character on the left is yut or y, which is yin wood. The character on the right is a sheep. I say sheep as opposed to goat because it is yin, that is to say feminine, and the goat has a very masculine meaning in Western terminology. So a lot of the Chinese guys use the term goat. I think it's rather important to differentiate between the sheep and the goat in this hemisphere. The relationship between this wood and the sheep is yin earth, and the wood is wood. The relationship of wood to earth is that wood eats earth. It is sustained by earth. So balanced wood is using just enough earth. Unbalanced wood is kind of internally conflicted. It's kind of self-harming. So on the level of individuals, those kinds of things may be a theme in 2015, this internal contradiction, and in your practices you may notice that, and also self-harming. In terms of the globe, the analogy here is things like fracking, which, you know, random acupuncture with poisons, which doesn't strike me as the greatest idea in the world, and shale retrieval. These are this metaphor of the self-attack applies to the earth, applies to the individual. But this is a year in which those things are likely to be prevalent. And I call the year of the wood sheep the year of gathering. The reason for that is because the sheep is inherently idealistic. It's a team player. They're a holder together of families. That if I find, if I'm dealing with a sheep, I will very often find an ability to contain an odd shape of family. The sheep is the character who can live easily with an extended family where there are relationships that there aren't names for. I mean, what you call your ex's kids, he left and you're still looking after them. What are the words for those? That's a sheep kind of quality. And in terms of celebrities, the classic one is Bruce Willis, who's a 1955 wood sheep, who very smartly, when his wife, Demi Moore, I was going to say Demis Christos for a second, Demi Moore, she's much thinner, isn't she? Was. Went off with Ashton Kutcher. And Bruce Willis, smart and brave man that he is, made friends with Ashton Kutcher. They become fishing buddies. Ashton Kutcher eventually gets bored. Bruce Willis still has fun with his kids. That's a sheep. So the sheep is the joiner, the holder together of families, and the sheep is loyal also. Also, the sheep is of the Chinese animals the most spiritual, the most intuitive, if you like. And by the way, if you're not a sheep, that doesn't mean you're not intuitive, and if you are a sheep, it might mean that you're not. these characters, if I'm casting these, what's called a bazi, if I'm talking about someone's Chinese horoscope, it actually consists of 4 pillars, that is to say 4 animals. So if you think you're just a sheep or a pig or whatever, actually your month and your day and your hour, which also run in cycles, will tell me a lot more about you with different nuance. So don't be disappointed if you are or are not a sheep because of what I say about sheep. What's called the lapium, metal in the sand. It's an ingenious Chinese way of combining the wood and the earth. Like, you remember when you did maths at school, you know, what's 1 banana plus 2 cucumbers? It's not 3 cucumbers. It's so that's that kind of composite idea. Metal in the sand is about scraping. It is about looking after resources, and that is very much an overarching theme of this year, the care for resources. It suggests the need to be careful with packaging. It suggests the need to not waste. It suggests the need to look hard for wealth and sustenance. The metaphor I always think of is have you heard the phrase "as happy as a sandboy," which referred to boys who worked in pubs in Victorian times, whose job was to sweep out the sand on a Sunday morning, and they'd pick out the spare change. So metal in the sand is that kind of thing. It's like prosperity, but hard won. This is not likely to be a free and easy kind of a year. The Minghua is the number of the year. I won't go into that too deeply because that's Dawn's territory. She's going to be telling you about which number you are and therefore how the year will be for you. But where what I do connects with 9-star key, which is what Dawn is going to talk about, is at this point these trigrams which come from the Book of Changes. That is the I Ching. The trigram related to the number 3 is Chun, which is the dragon. The dragon is the magician. So if you were born in 52, 64, 76, 88, 2000, 2012, you have some of that. Or if you were born on a day of the dragon, even more so, you'd need to ask me to look in my Chinese calendar to tell you which day that is. If you're born in the hour of the dragon, which is between 7 and 9 in the morning, or if you're born in the month of the dragon, which is April, you will have that quality with a different nuance. And the dragon is kind of central to what's going to happen this year for reasons that I probably haven't got time to go into. But that sudden change is what the dragon is about. And the 3 is about contention, argument, if you like, negatively. Positively, it's about plateau experiences, plateau relationships, plateau situations being pushed through, for better or for worse. And nothing in Chinese metaphysics is inherently good or bad. It's just a question of our viewpoint. The Tao, the idea of the way, that underpinning whatever the hell it is that moves things along, really doesn't give a damn about morals. It's just Taoing. So there's no good or bad about this. The hexagram from the Book of Changes. If you know the Book of Changes, it's a book of 64 life situations with 6 ways out of each, which, since you can have more than one of them, is quite a lot of alternatives. This hexagram, hands up if you know the Book of Changes. You familiar with it, with the I Ching? Yeah, good, thank you. Jing the Well is again about looking after the Earth's resources. It's about caring for the water. And also, you know, the well, the source. I mean, la source is wellspring, isn't it? So it's an interesting thing, given the context of this evening. It's about looking after water. And there's a quotation from the Book of Changes, which I'm really not agile enough to sort out from my iPad and the slides, but goes words to the effect of, this is in the Wilhelm edition, that unless a government looks after the water as it goes into the ground, it can never expect to wage war successfully, which is an extraordinary quotation. I'll look out the reference for you if anyone is interested. But Jing the Well is about looking after resources. This is the year, I talk about it, the year of gathering. It's the year of lines being drawn to do with what position you take up. So it's to do with the difference between being a polluter and being environmentally conscious, for instance. And by the way, we're all both. I wear shoes and I eat stuff, so I'm both of those things. But it's about making up your mind about these things. There are 3 climate summits this year. So there's a big chance of 2 possibilities. One, that the oil companies move on from Alberta to the Arctic, in which case some pundits will say we have decades at the very most. The other is that a lot of us stand up and be counted, and it's not about making wrong, it's about taking responsibility and opposing. So the Jing the Well is very much about that. The other thing that Jing is about the bucket that is used for drawing the water out. So we have to look very carefully after the mechanism we use for digging into the world's resources. But the world is finite. And another of the perhaps lines being drawn is between the ideas of business and spirituality, which are not in any sense incompatible. But the running idea in business is that growth is of itself an absolute good. Perpetual growth is an absolute good. Well, growth cannot be infinite. The earth is round. And cheap labor has been moving east since the end of the 18th century. Has got to the west coast of China. The next stop is Vancouver. It can't go on forever. Growth and profit are ideas that need real rethinking. And Jing the Well is very much about that, if you want to look out the text of it. So, the orthodox method that Chinese masters will use for looking at how a year will be, as I say, we'll be looking at, say, the previous sheep year, and particularly the previous wood sheep year. So if we look at the previous sheep year, for instance, which is going back 12 years, is 2003, that was when we wandered into Iraq. So there's some very interesting possibilities there. Nothing here is written in stone, and the idea of examining these things is to be able to do something different. And many people, my peers in the woo-woo business, do not like to read newspapers because they say they're negative. Well, I think knowing what's going on is not negative. I think being negative is being negative, and I recommend getting informed. We have to be balanced. Ram Dass said some of us need to know our zip code. I do know mine. So we look at previous wood sheep years. So if we go back 60 years, we have 1955, okay? 1955 is notable for a number of things. We have time for 2. It's the year that Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on that bus in Mississippi. And demonstrated 2 things. One is that black people probably have the same rights as white people, and the other is you can't shoot people without a gun. So those issues are very big issues in 2015. What's been happening in Ferguson, Mississippi will reverberate. Additionally, in 1955, Winston Churchill resigned for the 2nd time and was replaced by Anthony Eden. And there may be 1 or 2 people who are as old as me who vaguely remember that time. I was 3 when that happened. I don't remember that, but I remember what happened the following year, which was it was the last flourish of British gunboat diplomacy in Suez. So we have in Egypt. So we sort of kind of tried to invade Egypt. These are very, very poor portents for the possibilities this year. And I say, these are not certainties. These are possibilities that we can be aware of, we can be conscious of, we can give love to, and we can oppose the forces that insist upon them. If we go further back into the past, we get 1835, for instance, which was a time of parliamentary reform. And if we go back further again, the decade, I think, that is possibly most interesting to look at is the 2nd decade of the 18th century. I'm going back in multiples of 60 if I'm going too quickly. So this year, the wood sheep, there was a wood sheep in 1955, 1895, 1835, you with me? Therefore 1775. Americans will know 1775, rather an important time, because it's right between the Boston Tea Party and the Declaration of Independence. So 2016 that Moira was talking about, which is the same energy as 1776, looks like a very turbulent time. But at the beginning of the 18th century, some very interesting things happened. One was that in 1708 was the foundation of the South Sea Trading Company. Now, anyone who paid attention to history at school may have heard of the South Sea Bubble. And those of you who are too young probably haven't. But probably what you do think is that junk bonds were invented by Drexel Burnham in the 1980s. They weren't. They were invented by the South Sea Trading Company, which bought up the British national debt in the second decade of the 18th century, turned it into junk bonds, and sold it off, and they multiplied in value by thousands of percent, and then finally collapsed in 1720, spreading financial chaos all over Europe, all over the developed world as it then was. That mirrors exactly the decade that we're in now. So serious financial repercussions are likely to follow over the next 4 or 5 years. I think that's pretty clear from that. Another thing that happened in that decade, in 1714, was the accession of George I. That's the same as 2014. Was that me? Yeah, 2014. Now, last year, can everyone see? Last year, I predicted a yes in the Scottish referendum. I was wrong, but reading energy is a tricky thing. I was wrong, but I was right in no one expected 45%. Reading energy is quite easy. Reading exactly how it impacts is not. But that impulse to be properly represented, which is what was happening in Scotland, was expressed in a yes vote, which has probably also been expressed in UKIP votes as well, and also in the rise of support for the Greens, the NHA, and so on, minority parties, and also has been reflected in Hong Kong with those umbrella kids, in Quebec, in Catalonia, even in Ukraine. That desire to be properly represented will reverberate. And you can see it in the history. 1714, George I ascends to the throne of the United Kingdom. And we're at the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution. There aren't a lot of other places to compare in terms of written history. And George I, again, if you weren't paying attention in history lessons at school, or you didn't do Hanover, was brought in by Act of Parliament, which said there could never be another Stuart king. The Stuarts were Scottish, so the Scots, who had signed up to a union 7 years before, suddenly found they were not in a partnership, but a sort of serfdom. And that energy is very powerful, and it is reflected in 2014, and it's still out there. 1715, the Scots organised the first Highland uprising, and they actually invaded England. They came as far south as Preston. There was street fighting in Preston. I'm not suggesting street fighting in Preston in 2015, but what I am suggesting is that that desire to be represented has not been satisfied. And if you wanted a prediction about the general election, the only thing I'd say for sure is that the smaller parties are going to get more votes than anybody has dreamed, because there is so much anger around these issues. So it looks like a very interesting kind of a year. As I say, it's the year of gathering, it's the year of lines being drawn, it's also the year of commitment. So it's the year of exchanging vows, the year of becoming involved, the year of joining parties, clubs, and so on. It is a romantic year in its way. The sheep is romantic. It's definitely a year of partnership. So I will finish, if I may, by giving you a little bit of practical feng shui, because everyone always expects a feng shui man to say, you mustn't sit there and your sofa should be that color. So just finally, let me just give you a little bit of information about it. There are 3 things. I usually go to Southeast Asia in November each year to talk to the feng shui masters over there and to look at their various material and see what their view is. I didn't do that this year. I did all my predictions, which will be online, by the way. If you follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, you'll get all this stuff if you're interested. So I didn't look at their stuff this year. I did it all from first principles. And there are 3 things that the feng shui masters always agree on. Now I think we'll want another slide, so if we can, please bear with me. That's where I start from. That's actually much simpler than it looks, but that's the source material. That's what Chinese masters use to predict the year from. It's in the back of what's called the Tung Shu, the Farmer's Almanac, which is piled high in Chinatown, if you're interested. That's near the back. Next one, I think. That one, stop there. Right. These are the low shoes. I won't go into this in too much detail because this is Dawn's territory. And what you want to know, perhaps, is where you're going to get a plague of boils and where things work for you. The can you hear me? Is that right? The three things that Feng Shui masters agree on are these. One, where the energy is coming from the ear. So what is called the Tai Sui is coming from the energy is coming from the sheep. So the most powerful energy of the ear is coming from the sheep, which is in the southwest. The first sector of the southwest, what you might call southwest. So you don't face southwest for any long period of time, okay? So number one stricture, do not face southwest for any long period of time if you want to progress. So if you're sitting as I do sometimes in the coffee shop in Peter Jones, be very, very careful. You're sitting on that side and on that side. Your southwest, you'll find you get slowed up and delayed. Try it and see. You get headaches and stuff. And by the same token, in the southwest of the house, don't dig the earth, don't drill, don't agitate it. That's the way to make for difficulties. Where the Swapo points from the southwest is to the northeast one, which is what's called the ox, and you want the ox in front of you. So you want the southwest behind you and the ox in front of you. So do look towards the northeast, and again, don't agitate the northeast. And if you're thinking, what is this mumbo jumbo? I did explain it's about tomatoes. And the one place that you don't want to you really don't want to occupy if you can avoid it. But the place to be especially careful is what's called the Sanshara 3 Killings, which this year is in the west. So if you have a western door, try and use a different door. If you have a western room you cannot use, avoid it. If your bathroom is in the west, that's probably good news because you probably don't spend too long in there. And the theory is that the poor energy is drained by baths and toilets. So don't agitate the west either. So 3 things I'll leave you with. Don't face southwest, do face northeast, try to avoid the west, and don't agitate, dig the earth or drill in those 3 areas. So I think I've probably about run out of time and your patience. So thank you very much for listening to me tonight, and I hope we'll talk again soon. Thank you.